Have you ever met someone who made your heart lurch, like it was clawing at something it had no right to touch? I was 19, trapped in a summer that felt like quicksand, pulling me deeper into a haze of restless days and sleepless nights. My best friend's mom, Claire, looked me dead in the eyes one night and said something that stopped the world cold. "You remind me of someone I used to love," she whispered, her voice so soft yet so heavy it felt like she'd cracked open a vault she'd sealed shut for decades. I froze, my breath snagged somewhere between shock and a feeling I couldn't pin down. My best friend, Jake, was passed out upstairs, completely oblivious. The house was dead quiet, just the low hum of the air conditioner, and the weight of her words pressing into my chest like a physical force. I didn't know how to respond. My mouth was dry, my thoughts a chaotic swirl. Claire was 42, with this quiet grace that drew you in without her even trying. She wasn't just Jake's mom. She was the kind of person who made you feel like your rough, messy edges were worth something, like you weren't just drifting through life unnoticed. That night, in her kitchen, with the fridge light casting soft, ghostly shadows across her face, something shifted. Her words weren't just kind, they were a key turning in a lock I hadn't even known was there. What do you do when someone like that drops a confession so raw it feels like a wound? Someone you've known since you were a kid, someone who's supposed to be untouchable, forbidden in every way? I could have laughed it off, grabbed my soda, and bolted back upstairs, but I didn't. I stood there, rooted to the spot, staring into her green eyes, wondering who she saw when she looked at me. Was it just a ghost from her past, a memory she was chasing, or was she saying something more? Something dangerous? My mind was a storm of guilt, curiosity, and this reckless thrill that pulsed through me like a current. I was in over my head, and part of me didn't care. That one sentence rewrote everything I thought I knew about her, about me, about the invisible line we were standing on. What did she mean? And why did it feel like she was waiting for me to step closer to the edge, to say something that could change everything? That summer was a blur of heat and chaos. A season that felt like it was unraveling me thread by thread. I was 19, fresh off my first year of college, and my life was a mess. My parents were locked in a brutal divorce, their fights tearing through our house like shrapnel. Every night was a shouting match, every morning a tense silence, and I felt like I was disappearing in the crossfire. Home wasn't a refuge anymore. It was a war zone I couldn't wait to escape. So I spent most of my days at Jake's place, a big, quiet house tucked away in a sleepy Chicago suburb that felt like a sanctuary from the storm. Jake and I had been friends since middle school, the kind of bond where words aren't always necessary, where you can just exist together, and it's enough. His mom, Claire, was always around, but she wasn't the overbearing, helicopter parent type. She was different. She had this way of listening that cut through your defenses, like she could see the parts of you that you tried to keep hidden. At 42, she carried herself with a quiet strength, her dark hair loosely tied back, her green eyes sharp with stories she never told. She wasn't loud or flashy, but you couldn't help noticing her. There was something magnetic about her, like she'd lived 1,000 lives and locked them all away behind those eyes. Claire taught art at the local high school, always sketching in a worn leather notebook or leaving half-finished canvases scattered in the garage, each one a burst of color and emotion that felt like a glimpse into her soul. She'd asked me about my classes, my plans, things my own parents hadn't bothered with in years. I'd ramble about wanting to be a writer, about the stories I wanted to tell, half expecting her to glaze over, but she'd nod, her eyes lighting up like she understood the hunger behind my words, the need to create something bigger than myself. Jake would roll his eyes, call her artsy, or weird, but I didn't mind. She made me feel like I wasn't just some kid wasting time, like my dreams weren't just childish fantasies. That summer, I was at their house almost every day, playing video games with Jake until our eyes burned, swimming in their pool until our skin pruned, or just sprawled on the couch, trying to outrun my own reality. Claire was always there, in the background, making coffee or reading on the porch, her presence steady but never intrusive. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was just Jake's mom, a familiar fixture in a house I'd known for years. But then there were these moments, small, fleeting things that started to stick in my mind like burrs. She'd catch my eye when I made a dumb joke at dinner, her smile lingering a second too long, soft and knowing. Or she'd brush past me in the hallway, her arm grazing mine, and I'd feel this jolt, like I'd done something wrong just by noticing her. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't looking for it. I had a girlfriend, Lindsay, though things with her were already fraying at the edges. She was nice, sweet even, but we were on different wavelengths, drifting apart like two boats caught in different currents. I was restless, stuck in that strange limbo between being a kid and an adult, unsure of who I was or where I was going. Claire, though, she seemed to have it all figured out, like she carried the weight of the world with this quiet, unshakable resilience. I started noticing things I shouldn't have. The way her laugh softened when Jake wasn't in the room, the way her voice dropped when she spoke to me, the way she'd pause when she handed me something, her fingers hovering near mine for a heartbeat too long. Was I imagining it? Was she just being kind, maternal, the way she'd always been? I told myself I was being an idiot, reading into nothing. She was my best friend's mom, married, even if Jake's dad was always at work, leaving her alone in that big, quiet house. But that night in the kitchen, when she said those words, everything I'd been ignoring, every glance, every touch, every moment, came crashing into focus, and I couldn't look away. It was a Friday night in late July, the kind of humid evening where the air sticks to your skin like a second layer, heavy and unrelenting. Jake and I had been holed up in his room, battling through a marathon of video games, the kind where you lose track of time and the world outside fades away. But Jake crashed early, sprawled across his bed, snoring softly, leaving me wired and restless. I wandered downstairs for a drink, expecting the house to be empty, the kind of quiet that lets your thoughts run wild. But there was Claire, leaning against the kitchen counter, a glass of red wine in her hand, staring into the distance like she was lost in a memory she couldn't shake. The light was dim, just the soft, cold glow of the fridge and the faint hum of crickets slipping through the open window. I should have grabbed a soda and left, should have turned around and gone back upstairs, but she looked up and smiled, not her usual "Hey kid" smile, but something softer, almost fragile, like she was carrying a weight she didn't want anyone to see. "You're up late," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, like she was sharing a secret with the night. I mumbled something about not being tired, my words clumsy, and she nodded, her eyes holding mine like she saw more than I was saying. We started talking, safe stuff at first, like my classes, her latest art project, the kind of small talk that fills the silence without meaning much. But then it shifted, like the air itself thickened with something unspoken. She asked about my parents' divorce, her tone gentle but direct, like she knew exactly how much it was breaking me. I didn't want to go there, didn't want to drag that mess into her quiet kitchen, but her voice, the way her eyes held mine without judgment, made it impossible to hold back. I spilled everything, the shouting matches that shook the walls, the way my mom's voice cracked when she thought I wasn't listening, the way I felt like I was fading into the background of their war, invisible and irrelevant. She listened, really listened, her face softening with every word, her eyes steady and warm, and for the first time in months, I felt like someone actually saw me, like I wasn't just a ghost haunting my own life. Then it happened. "You remind me of someone I used to love," she said, so quietly I almost missed it, her voice like a thread pulled too tight, ready to snap. My heart slammed against my ribs, loud enough I was sure she could hear it. I looked at her, trying to read her face, but she was staring at her wine glass, her fingers trembling slightly, like she hadn't meant to let those words slip out. I laughed, a nervous, shaky sound, trying to break the tension that had settled between us like fog. "What, like an old boyfriend?" I asked, but my voice cracked, betraying the storm inside me. She didn't laugh back. She just looked at me, her green eyes locking onto mine, and said, "Someone who saw the world the way you do." The words hit like a punch, stealing my breath, leaving me dizzy. I didn't know what to say. My mind was screaming to change the subject, to run, to do anything but stand there in that charged silence. But my feet felt glued to the floor, my body refusing to move. The air was thick, electric, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for the other to break the spell. I could have brushed it off, made a joke, pretended it didn't happen, but instead I asked, "Who was he?" My voice was barely audible, trembling with something I couldn't name, fear, want, guilt, all tangled together. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her glass, her eyes flickering with something raw, then started talking about a guy from her college days, a dreamer, restless like me, always chasing something he couldn't quite grasp, always looking for meaning in a world that felt too big. She didn't give details, just enough to paint a shadow of him, but the way she spoke, her voice soft, tinged with a longing that felt alive, made me feel like she was talking about me, too. Like I was standing in his place, filling a void she'd carried for years, a space I had no right to occupy. The conversation drifted after that, back to safer ground, music, movies, the kind of things you talk about when you're trying to pretend everything's normal. But her words hung between us, heavy and alive, like a heartbeat we could both hear. She didn't say anything else like it, but she didn't need to. Every glance, every pause felt charged, like the air itself was holding its breath. I started noticing things I hadn't before. How close she was standing, her shoulder just inches from mine, how her hand brushed mine when she handed me a glass of water, her fingers lingering for a split second too long. I told myself I was reading too much into it, that it was just my imagination running wild, but my pulse was racing, my skin buzzing with something I couldn't shake. I knew I should have gone upstairs, back to Jake's room, back to the safety of the world I knew, but I didn't. We talked for hours, about music we loved, books that broke us, the little moments that make life feel bigger than it is, until the sky outside started to lighten, a faint gray creeping through the windows, signaling the end of the night. When I finally left the kitchen, my head was spinning, my thoughts a tangle of guilt, and something dangerously close to want. What was that? Was she just being kind, sharing a moment of vulnerability, or was there something more, something we were both too afraid to name? And why did I hope there was, when every fiber of my being knew it was wrong? The weeks that followed were a slow, excruciating kind of torture. I kept going to Jake's house, telling myself it was just to hang out with him, to keep things normal. But every time Claire was there, I felt it, this pull, this ache that settled deep in my bones. She didn't bring up that night, didn't mention the guy I reminded her of, but there were moments that made my heart stutter, moments that felt like they belonged to us alone. A lingering look when Jake was distracted, his head buried in his phone. A smile that felt too private, too knowing, like we were sharing a secret no one else could see. I started finding excuses to be around her, offering to help with dishes after dinner, lingering in the kitchen long after Jake had gone to bed. Jake didn't notice, too caught up in his own world, his own girlfriend, his own life, but I felt like I was betraying him every second I spent in that house. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Her words, someone I used to love, played on a loop in my head, haunting me like a song I couldn't shake. Was I insane to think she meant something more? Was I just a kid with a stupid crush, projecting my own chaos onto her? I tried to pull back, to focus on Lindsay, on school, on anything that could anchor me to the life I was supposed to be living, but it was like Claire had carved a space in my mind I couldn't escape. Every time I saw her, it got worse. The way she moved, so deliberate and graceful, the way her voice softened when she spoke to me, the way her eyes seemed to see parts of me I didn't even understand myself. I'd catch myself staring at her hands as she sketched, at the way her hair fell loose from its tie, at the quiet strength in her posture, and I'd hate myself for it. She was my best friend's mom. She was married. She was twice my age. But none of that stopped the way my heart raced when she was near, the way my thoughts spiraled into dangerous territory. One afternoon, Jake got called into work, leaving me and Claire alone in the house. I should have left, should have made some excuse and walked out the door, but I didn't. She was in the garage, working on a painting, a chaotic swirl of blues and grays that looked like a storm trapped on canvas, full of emotion I couldn't decipher. I wandered in, pretending I was just passing through, but she didn't seem surprised to see me. "Want to help?" she asked, holding out a brush, her voice light but her eyes sharp, like she knew exactly why I was there. I'm no artist, but I said yes because it meant being close to her, because it meant stepping into her world for a moment. We painted in silence for a while, the air thick with this unspoken thing between us, the garage smelling of paint and summer heat, every brushstroke feeling like a confession I wasn't ready to make. Then she started talking, about her life, her dreams, how she'd wanted to be an artist, to travel the world with a sketchbook and no plans, but ended up teaching instead, tethered to a life she hadn't chosen. There was a sadness in her voice, a quiet regret that felt like it was spilling out of her for the first time, like she was letting me see a part of her she kept hidden from everyone else. She talked about her marriage, too, not directly, but in fragments, enough to paint a picture of a life marked by absence. Her husband was always working, always distant, leaving her to fill the silence of their big house with her art, her thoughts, her unspent dreams. I listened, my chest tight, feeling like I was seeing her for the first time, not just Jake's mom, but a woman carrying her own scars, her own longing, her own quiet rebellion against the life that had boxed her in. I don't know what possessed me, but I told her she didn't seem like someone who settled. It was a small thing, but it felt enormous, like I was crossing a line just by saying it, like I was reaching for something I had no right to touch. She looked at me, a streak of paint smudged on her cheek, her eyes softening in a way that made my heart pound. "You're sweet," she said, her voice soft and deliberate, like she was letting me see something she usually kept locked away. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, like they carried a weight she couldn't fully express. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it, my hands trembling as I gripped the paintbrush, the canvas blurring in front of me. I wanted to say something more, to tell her how much her words that night in the kitchen had messed me up, how they turned my world upside down, but I didn't. I just kept painting, my strokes clumsy and uneven, the silence between us louder than any words could have been. We stayed like that for an hour, maybe more, painting side by side, the air heavy with everything we weren't saying. When Jake got home, I bolted, mumbling some half-hearted excuse, but the truth was I couldn't trust myself to stay. I couldn't trust the way my heart raced when she was near, the way my thoughts kept slipping into places they shouldn't go. After that, it was like we had a secret language, one no one else could hear or see. It wasn't obvious, nothing anyone would notice, but it was there, woven into the way her eyes lingered when we passed in the hallway, the way her laugh softened when Jake wasn't around, the way her voice carried a warmth that felt like it was just for me. I started staying over more, even when Jake was busy, telling myself it was normal, just friends hanging out, just me avoiding the chaos of my own life. Claire never stopped me. She'd asked me to stay for dinner, her voice casual but her eyes saying something else, something that made my pulse quicken. We'd watch old movies in the living room, sitting just close enough to feel the heat of her presence, the space between us crackling with something unspoken. I'd catch myself watching her instead of the screen, memorizing the way her lips curved when she laughed, the way her fingers tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the way she seemed to glow in the dim light of the room. I knew it was wrong. Jake was my best friend, the one person who'd always had my back, and her husband was still in the picture, even if he was more like a shadow than a presence. But I couldn't stop. I didn't want to. Every moment with her felt like stealing something precious, something I didn't deserve but couldn't let go of, like I was holding onto a piece of her that no one else could touch. One evening, a few weeks after the garage, we ended up alone again. Jake was out with his girlfriend, and Claire suggested we take a walk to the park nearby, saying she needed some air. I should have said no, should have made an excuse, but I didn't. We walked through the quiet suburb, the streets lined with old trees and soft streetlights, the world feeling smaller, softer, like it belonged just to us. We talked about everything and nothing, her favorite artists, the stories I wanted to write, the way the stars looked brighter when the world was quiet. There was a bench by the park's small pond, and we sat there, the night wrapping around us like a blanket. She told me about a trip she'd taken in her 20s, backpacking through Europe, sketching in cafes and sleeping under the stars. Her voice was alive, full of a freedom she'd lost somewhere along the way, and I could feel her longing, her ache for a life she'd left behind. I told her about my own dreams, the ones I was too scared to chase, the ones that felt too big for someone like me. She listened, her eyes steady, and said, "You're braver than you think." It was a simple thing, but it landed like a confession, like she saw something in me I couldn't see myself. We sat there in silence for a while, the pond reflecting the moonlight, the air thick with something neither of us would name. I wanted to reach for her hand, to close the distance between us, but I didn't. I couldn't. The weight of Jake, her husband, the life we were both tied to, it was too heavy, too real. One night it went too far. Jake was out with his girlfriend again, and Claire and I were in the backyard, sharing a bottle of wine she'd opened. The air was warm, the stars sharp above us, and we were talking about nothing important, movies, music, the way the world felt too big sometimes, too heavy. But the air felt different, heavier, like we were standing on the edge of a cliff, one wrong step away from falling. She looked at me, her eyes catching the moonlight, and said, "You're too young to be this sad." I laughed, but it came out raw, like I was choking on the truth. I told her I wasn't sad, just lost, like I was searching for something I couldn't name, something I could feel but couldn't touch. She reached out, her hand resting on mine, her touch lingering too long, her fingers warm and steady. "You'll find your way," she said, her voice soft but sure, like she believed it more than I did. My heart was racing, my mind screaming to stop, to think about Jake, her husband, the life I was risking, but my body didn't care. I could smell her perfume, faint and floral, feel the warmth of her breath as the space between us shrank. We were closer now, our voices quieter, the world narrowing to just the two of us, the rest of it fading into the background. I leaned in, just a fraction, my heart pounding like a drum, and she didn't move away. For a moment, I thought it was going to happen. I thought we were going to cross that line, the one we'd been dancing around for weeks, the one that would change everything. My pulse was a wildfire, my thoughts a blur of want and guilt, my body screaming to close the distance. But then she pulled back, her face unreadable, her eyes shadowed with something I couldn't decipher. "We can't," she whispered, her voice breaking, raw with something that sounded like regret. She stood up, walked inside without looking back, and left me sitting there, my heart pounding in my throat, the night swallowing me whole. I didn't sleep that night. Guilt crashed over me like a tidal wave, drowning me in the weight of what I'd almost done, what I'd wanted to do. What was I thinking? Jake was my best friend, the one constant in my chaotic life, the one person who'd always been there when I needed him. Claire was his mom, married, twice my age, someone I had no right to want, no right to even think about. But the worst part, the part one couldn't admit to anyone, not even myself, was that I didn't want to stop. I kept replaying her touch, her words, the way her eyes had held mine like I was the only thing that mattered in that moment. I saw her everywhere, in the quiet moments when I was alone, in the dreams that woke me up sweating, in the ache that settled in my chest and refused to leave. I started avoiding Jake's house, making excuses to stay away, telling myself I needed space, needed to clear my head. But it didn't help. She was in my head, her voice, her smile, her confession about someone she used to love, they haunted me like a ghost I couldn't outrun. I tried to focus on Lindsay, to fix things with her, to pour myself into school, into writing, into anything that could anchor me to the life I was supposed to be living, but nothing worked. Nothing filled the space she'd left, the void she'd carved out with a single sentence. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd hold my breath, hoping it was her, even though I knew it couldn't be, shouldn't be. I was unraveling, torn between the guilt that ate at me and this reckless, consuming need to know what she meant, who she saw in me, whether I was just a shadow of someone else or something real, something she felt as deeply as I did. Summer ended, and I moved back to campus, thinking distance would snap me out of it, would break the spell she'd cast. It didn't. Claire was everywhere, in the faces of strangers passing by, in the silence of my dorm room, in the songs that played through my headphones, their lyrics twisting into memories of her. Jake noticed I was off, kept asking what was wrong, his brow furrowed with concern, but I lied, blamed it on school stress, on the divorce, on anything but the truth. I couldn't tell him that I was in love with his mom, that her words had carved a hole in me I couldn't fill, that I was carrying a secret that would destroy everything if it ever came out. I stopped going to their house, cut contact as much as I could without raising suspicion, telling Jake I was busy, swamped with classes, anything to keep my distance. Claire texted me once, a simple, "Hope you're doing okay." Her words neutral but heavy, like they carried everything we hadn't said. I stared at the message for hours, my thumb hovering over the reply button, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I'd say, what I'd do if I saw her again, if I heard her voice, if I felt the weight of her gaze. The thought of her was enough to pull me back to that night in the backyard, to the moment we almost crossed a line we could never uncross, to the way her touch had burned through me, leaving a mark I couldn't erase. Years later, I heard from Jake that Claire and her husband split. He mentioned it in passing, his voice casual, like it was just another piece of news, but it hit me like a freight train. He didn't say much, didn't offer details, and I didn't ask, couldn't ask, because I was afraid of what I'd hear, what I'd feel. Part of me wanted to reach out, to find her, to see if she still thought of me, if that moment in the kitchen, in the backyard, in the garage, meant as much to her as it did to me. I wanted to know if she still saw that someone she used to love when she looked at me, or if I'd been a fleeting shadow, a moment of weakness in a life that had moved on without me. But I didn't reach out. I couldn't. Some doors are better left closed, even if they haunt you, even if they leave you wondering what might have been. I still think about her, about that summer, about the way her words changed me. Who was that someone she used to love? Why did it feel like she saw him in me, like I was carrying a piece of her past she couldn't let go? Was I just a reflection of someone else, a ghost she was chasing, or was there something real between us, something we both felt but were too afraid to name? I'll never know, and maybe that's the point. Some stories don't get neat endings, don't wrap up with closure or answers. They just leave you carrying them, heavy and unresolved, for the rest of your life, like a weight you learn to live with but never forget. If this story hit you, if it stirred something you've kept buried, something you've never told anyone, subscribe for more. Have you ever felt a connection you had to walk away from, one that left you questioning everything, one that still lingers in the quiet moments? Share it in the comments. I read every single one, and I know how much it means to let those stories out. And if you know someone who's carried a secret like this, someone who's felt the weight of a forbidden moment, send them this video. Maybe it'll remind them they're not alone, that some stories are meant to haunt us, to shape us, even if they never find an end.